pistol. He relaxed, and they all sat quietly. The policeman looked at his watch and leaned his head against the window. He closed his eyes halfway. The man who had asked for the cigarettes was Frank Giorgio, boss of Alabama gambling, and now a convicted murderer. He shifted slightly in his seat, brought a silver lighter out of his coat pocket, and held it to a cigarette. He looked at Chris through the first puff of smoke. "I used to read your column quite often, Mr. Adams," he said, making it sound like a compliment. "Thanks," Chris replied. "I particularly enjoyed the job you did on the authorities every now and then," Giorgio remarked in his cultured, cold voice. "Very bold reporting, I must say." "Right now, I'd say the authorities are enjoying the job they did on me," Chris answered. He thought of Carr, bumbling and stupid Police Lieutenant Carr. He'd been good copy the times Chris had caught him in one blunder or another, but you had to admit one thing. He'd been efficiency itself on the Chris Adams case. "It's a funny thing." Giorgio glanced over at Sergeant Brewer. The big man's eyes were rolled up in his head and a white film showed beneath the half-open slits. "It's a funny thing, you and I taking this trip together." He nodded thoughtfully. "Guys got to not be so smart somewhere along the way to take this trip." He laughed, a sudden sound in his thin nostrils. "That's our trouble, isn't it, Adams? Not so smart." Chris shrugged. "And yet I had plenty cause to do what I did. I had cause." His eyes were on Brewer, but Chris knew they weren't seeing him. Not Brewer or anything else on this train. They were seeing something far away. Chris remembered the case. Tony Arezzi had been Frank Giorgio's first lieutenant, taking care of payoffs from the separate gambling operations. One day, Arezzi made a deal with the various men in charge to keep on paying him even if something happened to Giorgio, and then he'd arranged for that something to happen. But Giorgio had been in the mobs too long to be fooled that way. For some reason, he'd been blind to everything else the kid had done, but not to a trick like that. The night before the payoff, the kid walked into Frank's room for a friendly visit and came out with a skin full of lead. The police had been waiting for years, but this was the first make they'd ever been able to get on the gambler. So they were extra careful to make it stick. It was a funny thing, too. One of Giorgio's triggermen had been in the room with him, but it was Frank who did the shooting. Apparently Frank had liked the kid, for he made a poor showing in court, and his expensive battery of lawyers had all they could do to keep him out of the chair. He got life. "What about you, Mr. Adams?" Giorgio was saying. "What made you do it?" Chris turned his head and saw the older man's eyes on him. "I didn't," he said, and saw the eyes glitter humorously, then flicked toward the sleeping cop. "Oh, I see," said Giorgio with no trace of amusement in his voice. "That's rough," he said, and turned away to mash out a cigarette. Chris felt the blood come up into his face. "What are you going to do, Adams? Keep singing the same old song till somebody writes music to it? Forget it. You're fixed up like nobody has ever been fixed up before, signed, sealed, and about to be delivered. Just forget all about it. Relax. You're going to be a federal guest for a long time. 20 years if you're real lucky, so you better start learning how to relax." A Negro 3 seats up was singing the Empty Bed Blues and clicking his handcuffs against the metal armrest. Further up, near the forward end of the car, 3 board guards sat playing poker. Back at the other end, a female narcotics pusher, whose name Chris couldn't remember from the news releases, sat with a policewoman. Otherwise, the car was empty. "You know something," Giorgio said, and Chris saw that the nervous twist of his mouth was returning. "A funny thing," the other man went on. "I never gambled in my life." He glanced at Chris amusedly. "I own hundreds of pinballs, slots, wheels, everything, and I never put a nickel in one of them. Not a nickel." He looked at Chris. "That a funny thing?" "I don't know." "What time is it?" Giorgio asked suddenly. Chris checked his watch. 10. The older man frowned and said, "I mean exactly. Exactly what time?" Again Chris looked at his wrist. 4 minutes after 10 o'clock, exactly.